Fishbowl conversation yesterday?
They're veterans.
Okay, all right. So y'all more or less know what we're gonna do here. Okay, I'm gonna explain for those who did not attend yesterday, but you're gonna pick it up real quick. So we have chosen the Fishbowl as a modality to have these conversations at the Lighthouse because we understand it to be a more participatory, democratic form by which we have opportunities for everyone to participate in the conversation. Now, this one is a special experiment because we don't have any invited guests for this. We're going straight to you. We're going straight to the room. Aniyia and I are going to chop it up a little bit, but we're going to invite you to get involved pretty quickly. So I want to frame the conversation that we're going to have today, and then I'll remind us all about the format of how the Fishbowl actually works. Yeah? Okay. So we did title this session, Can AI Be Ethical? But we were being provocative, right? Because actually, that question with a yes-no answer is not very interesting. In fact, it totally depends, right? It depends on who builds it, who governs it, who profits from it, and who bears the cost. The more interesting and honest question that we actually want to be in dialogue about today is, what does it look like for us to be ethical in relation to AI? Because it is not arriving, it is already here. It is in all of our phones, our inboxes, our kids' classrooms, our hiring processes, our creative tools, our news feeds, our medical records. It's already here. Most of us are already in a relationship with AI, whether we want to be or not. And the terms of that relationship were largely set by someone else. Companies optimizing for scale and profit, not by the people living with the consequences. So the question isn't really about the technology, or it's not entirely about the technology. It's about us. It's about what principles we want to ground ourselves in as we navigate something that's moving faster than our ability to fully understand it. It's about choices we make personally, what tools we use, what we expose our families to, what we consent to, and how those personal choices connect to the systemic conditions. Who's writing the policy? Who's setting the standards? Who's profiting and who is being harmed? So we don't have a panel. We're gonna start over here with Aniyia and myself, and then we're gonna do this Fishbowl thing. So for those who were here yesterday, you'll remember. For those who are new today, I'm gonna give you the lowdown. This is what's going to happen. Aniyia and I are going to start by chit-chatting together. We're going to sort of table a question for us to chat a little bit about. And when we start, we're going to invite anyone who feels so moved to get up out your seat and come in and sit down with us on one of these red chairs and join the conversation. And eventually, we'll have a full circle of people. And when the last empty chair is filled, someone else in the circle will have to get up and make space for someone else to come and fill the seat. And then someone else will have to get up and leave to make space for someone else to come in. And in that way, we will collectively hold the responsibility for as many people as possible having an opportunity to step into the conversation that we're having. Does that make sense sort of logistically for how we're going to do that? Okay. So the other thing that I want to remind us of, and we talked a little bit about this yesterday, is we have some practices that really help make sure, if we can hold and practice them together, that make sure that we're able to have the most robust and nuanced conversation that we can. The first one is that we're listening for understanding. Does anybody remember what I said yesterday about listening for understanding or listening with curiosity? Jason, what does it mean?
Instead of waiting, just listening, waiting to say whatever you want to say, you actually deeply process what is being said.
Yes. So we're not listening to respond, we're listening to understand. And we're listening with that curious ear that recognizes that the people in this circle are coming from very different backgrounds. And so we may, and especially in this conversation, right? This is a hot conversation around the ethics of AI. This is hot. And we want to have that conversation because we believe that this community can hold and needs to hold these kinds of conversations together. And what that means is we're going to be coming from very different places and backgrounds, so we want to be curious with one another. People may say things in this circle that feel very different or far removed from your own experience, so we want to try to meet those differences with curiosity. So we're listening to understand, we're listening with curiosity. The second thing we want to invite you to do is to trust the wisdom of the room. And when I'm talking about the wisdom of the room, I mean where the conversation is going to go. So you might be sitting here and think, ooh, Aniyia just said something spicy. I got a hot take on that. I'm going to come and join the circle. But by the time it appears that it's your turn to talk, maybe the conversational river has gone down a different little eddy. That's okay. Trust the conversation and where it has gone. Stay present with what is alive in the circle and go along with the conversation. Somebody else may bring your hot take up later. Maybe you share that hot take with somebody later on over a drink. But trust the conversation and the people in it and be with that conversation as it's going. Does that make sense? Trust the wisdom of the room. And then the last one is take space, make space. And this is really about paying attention to how you're taking up space in the conversation in a very literal way in this modality, because you are literally getting up and taking your space in the circle, and then you are getting up and making space for somebody else. So that means if you've come and joined the circle, you want to be paying attention to how much you're talking versus how much other people are talking. You might be paying attention to inviting other people into the circle or in the circle to contribute. So rather than I have a thing to say, perhaps I have a question for you. And also, you want to be paying attention to who was the last person who got here. Was it me? Because if it was me, or if I was the last person, you know what I mean. If I've been here the longest, it's my turn to get up and make room for somebody else. So we have to be, each of us collectively, holding our own responsibility for how much room we're taking up in the conversation. So we've got take space, make space. We've got trust the wisdom of the room. And we've got listen with curiosity and for understanding. Are these things that we can practice together in order to hold this conversation together in a good way? Yes. Rad. Okay. Whew.
Shout out to your thighs for getting up and down.
Shout out to my thighs.
Literally 50 times in the last 5 minutes.
Okay.
Somebody's been doing her squats.
I have actually. It's, us aging women, we gotta save that muscle mass. Can I get a what for perimenopause? Okay.
Hey.
That's right. Thanks, everybody. She's a comedian in her spare time. Okay. Let's see. Where are we going to start? So from this moment on, I'm going to seed a little question for Aniyia and I to start chatting. And if you feel moved, come on in. Okay? Ooh, let me say one thing about the microphones. So every microphone has a tiny little switch at the bottom with a 0 and a 1. When you get your microphone, make sure it's switched on to 1 so that it's on. Also, try to talk really close because we're recording these conversations, and so we really want to get your voice recorded. So try to bring that mic right up close to your face. A good way to do it is to just let it rest right on your chin, because then if you move your head, the microphone follows you, and that's handy for those of us who might want to be gesticulating and talking with our hands, and then we only get part of what we're trying to say. You know what I'm saying? So right on your chin. Okay. Here we go. Here we go. Ooh, okay.
Oh, man.
She's dead. Number 2's dead. 2's out.
Number 2's dead. Number 3's dead.
Don't take number 2.
Tech support.
Okay. So we're going to start by getting really real about our own use of AI. What is our relationship to AI right now? How are we using it? Where have we drawn a line? Where are we conflicted? What do you think? How are you using AI, Aniyia?
All right, everybody, I have a confession to make as I'm in the circle. I don't really use AI very much. I don't know if that, I'm like, does it deserve an applause? I think that I have all of these issues still unresolved with it and me feeding it.
Tell me.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I definitely have concerns over, where is it going and what are they doing with it? And I always, I just have a low-grade paranoia around being surveilled and things that I type into a device, generally, even, messages. I've, attempted to, turn Gemini off in, my Google workspace and all of that stuff. I just am I don't know yet if I want it to know this much about me, and I'm just kind of trying to make myself as invisible as I possibly can. But then there have been like one or two situations where I'm just like in a pinch and I'm like, well, it would be nice to have some starter material for this like memo I have to write kind of thing. But I also, because I haven't used it like a ton, I'm like terrible at prompting it. And I'm just like, this is trash. And then it kind of like reinforces my like, why am I even using this? I like my writing artisanal. So anyway, I think I sit and have lots of discussions every day about sort of the philosophical aspects of AI, but I actually like use it in very, very limited ways personally. I do, however, like on the far extreme of the spectrum, have this, it's hot. We are gonna get this together, guys. That I also have like this other sort of thing that I think pushes on the complete opposite of the spectrum, where I'm just like, I don't want them to make my AI clone before I make my AI clone. And so I'm like, well, maybe I need to make my AI clone, because I'm almost thinking about it like in the way that we, like, you know, I don't know if I have any friends. Actually, I know there's at least a couple friends in this room, because we've talked about it, that like are, you know, the domain buyers, like where you just like, ooh, I'm gonna buy this something.com, like whatever, and like you just like have a random thing and you're like, I'm just gonna buy it, and it's almost just like purchasing like virtual real estate. Do you know what I mean? So I'm like, it's like that same kind of thing where I'm just like, well, I need to own it before someone else owns it. But generally, yeah, I'm. Does that make me a Luddite?
Listen. This is too hot.
Musical mics.
Does that make you a Luddite? I don't think it makes you a Luddite. I think in many ways I'm the Luddite in a different way. So I do use AI. Yes. So I had a friend who was like, I don't know, a year ago, she was like, honey, I got to get you using ChatGPT. You got to try this. It's going to change your life. And I was like, I don't know. I feel all the things. I don't know how. I feel uncomfortable. And she was like, come over to my house. Let's have a cup of tea. Let me show you how I use it. And just like, take my word for it. It's going to really, and she's like an event planner and all the things. And I was like, okay. And then I started using it and I was like, oh, dang. Like, oh, dang. It was game changing in terms of like the way in which it could help me synthesize. Like so much of the work that I do as a facilitator and strategist is synthesis. And I will tell you that I went through a whole period where I let it do too much. Like I went too far. I got too close to the sun. And I would like prepare an agenda for a client and send it off before like really understanding. I mean, I read it obviously, but like, but the thing is, when the AI writes the thing for you, it's not you. Like you don't know it. You don't know it in your body. You don't know it in your mind. You don't know it in your cells, right? So I went too far. The pendulum swung too far, and then I found myself in a like dicey situation with a client. And I was like, oh, I didn't mean that. I take it back. And then I was like, gotta swing it back. And then, you know, somebody smarter than me was like, you really need to be careful with ChatGPT. Try this Claude situation instead. So now me and Claude have been kicking it for a little bit. I actually refer to it as my assistant, Lil Debbie. And I do. And I will tell you, like, it's been really helpful in many ways. But the reason why I say that I'm sort of a Luddite in this situation is that, and I think I mentioned this at some other point. That's a terrible one. Turn that one on. We hate that one. Number 3 is dead to us. Is that I don't come from tech. So I don't have the inherent kind of skepticism that I see so many of my colleagues that I now have who do work in the tech sector, who have this skepticism that you were talking about being surveilled and all this kind of stuff. Like I have it as like now like a teeny tiny little voice in my head, but it's not like an alive presence in my like front of mind all the time. And I have been pulled down the river of convenience, like 100,000%.
I do feel I do feel like there is an element though of damn, I lost my train of thought with the hot mic. There is an element of something that is going to come back to me.
I don't know about being surveilled. I haven't thought about the surveillance.
Shit.
Hello, I'm just going to interrupt and bring a mic that might be better. Let's give it a try.
We're going to use one mic. We're going to use it like a talking stick. Take it away. Take that mic away. We hate that mic.
Aw.
I love you, Eloisa. We love. Give it up for Eloisa. We love Eloisa. We just hate that mic. Okay, we're going to legit use one mic. It's going to be a talking stick, and this is what we're going to do with it. Okay. Do you remember your train of thought? No. Do you have a new one?
Oh, I know what I was going to say that, like, actually, though, I do think that it's been interesting because, you know, in some parts of us actually preparing for the lighthouse, like with some of the things, and usually Jocelyn and I kind of like, actually, usually every year before the lighthouse, this is our 4th year, Jocelyn and I the night before will like sit down for a couple hours and like actually, like write out and do all the things that we're gonna like say and all the whatevers. And this time Jocelyn was like, let Lil Debbie help Aniyia. And I was like, okay. And like we still did have our sit down and do all of the things. And I think you're right, like with that embodied thing where I was just like reading it and I'm just like, okay, yeah, there's some good stuff in here. But I also was just like, and you're just like, you kind of got to actually like really try to be with it in a certain kind of way. I feel like you had to like sort of coach me through some of it. And then how I wanted to kind of like really feel like, okay, now it's useful to me. So I'm like, I feel like you're helping to sort of Virgil me into like, okay, maybe. But I think the other big thing I was gonna say is like how much of it is a behavior change, like just in the patterns of like when I open up my browser to do work and I'm just like, I'm gonna do this task. Like, I feel like there are people now who are very hardwired to like immediately I'm gonna go to Claude and I'm gonna bop. And I'm just like, immediately I'm gonna go do like whatever the more analog like version of this is because that's just like easier for my brain to comprehend. But it's not like I have anything against people doing it, you know?
Oh, you were here.
Jocelyn, I'm going to react to the comfort that this thing brings us. I remember I'm a father of 2, 15 and 12-year-old, and one of them was asking me questions, and I think I was in this space of just going too far and using it for everything. And he asked me a question about his homework, and I'm like, sure. So I grabbed my phone, and I immediately started typing the question. Thankfully, I caught myself, and I said, wait, I actually know this question. So I put the phone down and was very present with him. And as a father, I think on the one hand, I said, shit, like this thing is really changing my behavior, even with my kid. And on the other hand, I could feel atrophy in my brain and in my muscle to like, shit, like if we are not aware of this muscle that we feel more comfortable, right, without using, then I'm a little bit afraid of the future. And because we're in this world of speed, like everything is fast, everything is speed. So if you're not using Claude, Gemini, like any of these things, you're staying behind. Then it's a very real tension, very real tension.
I just want to respond real quick and say, like, when I first started using it, I was like, oh my God. Like somebody earlier today was talking about the way in which, ostensibly, this is the other thing. I don't read a lot of tech news. Sorry, spoiler alert. But apparently, a lot of people in tech news are saying this kind of shit, which is it alleviates some of our cognitive load. Like one of the things it can do for us is alleviate some of our cognitive load, right? And when I first sort of started to experience that, I was like, oh, dang. As a person who's a community organizer and facilitator in movement spaces, et cetera, I was like, great. Let's get the AI to do all the dumb shit that nobody wants to do. Like fucking do my taxes, like do all the terrible shit that nobody wants to do. And then it'll free up this space for us to be more human together, for us to be together and spend that additional cognitive load or that additional time with one another doing the very human work of relationship. Because I know as a movement builder that trust is the most critical ingredient that you need to do collective work, and we only build trust by being in relationship with one another. And so if we can open up additional cognitive load, which also allows us the emotional processing power to be doing the relationship building with people, well, hallelujah. Haven't we just found a delightful thing? And the thing is, to your point about the speed of what we're part of, that's a beautiful dream, but we have to use our extra cognitive load deliberately in order to actually realize that dream. We have to utilize the additional opportunity we have for that analytical and logical thinking and synthesis thinking when we're doing in-person conversation and being and relational work with one another, or we will lose it, right? So there's like a beautiful dream, but it continuously, and I think this is such a classic theme in all of the conversations we've had about tech, is that we individually have to continuously be vigilant about our own muscles and our own participation and choice making. However, when we have systemic issues like this and the solution gets trickled down to the individual level, we know we're being played. So there's a trap there as well, right? It's not enough, it's not fair that the answer to realizing this beautiful dream rests on each of us as individuals. It's sort of like saying we can recycle our way to saving the planet. Like, that's a trap, it's a lie, and we've all been sold it and some bullshit. So I'm gonna step out of the circle and pass the microphone over here, and now it's up to y'all. I'm out.
I love AI. Practically in bed with AI. That's how much I use it all the time. And I think that it's really changing the workplace in a very interesting way. I think there is definitely room for coexistence, healthy coexistence with AI and humans. I work for a SaaS company. They basically have forced AI on us. And at first, and we use Claude, I love Claude. And at first, I was very skeptical of it. And then I felt like someone pushed me over a ledge into the Claude pool, and I had to learn it. And I will tell you, as I lead corporate comms for my company, it writes my press releases in 5 minutes, and they're factual and accurate. I can do research, and I look at the backlinks, so I know that it's coming from a legitimate place. I'm now focused on improving our GEO versus SEO, because for marketers, GEO is where it's at. People aren't going... GEO is basically, it's the AI model. SEO is when somebody goes to a website and you're trying to, it's search terms, search engine optimization. GEO is for AI. It's G engine optimization, but I forgot what the G is. Generative, yeah, yes. But now nobody's going to Google or going to a website directly, they're going to these models. And that's how people are getting to your website. So for PR, which is what I specialize in, we're having a moment, right? Like, you need to get articles out there in third-party validation so the AI models can pick up your company name and find you. So it's turning the marketing world upside down, the corporate comms world upside down in the sense of getting new business and clients, but it is also turning the internal workplace upside down, because even for my simple job of writing a press release, and I have a team of 2 people, it's cutting down a ton of work. So I absolutely love it. And you can also feed spreadsheets into it and different links of files. And you had said something before about how it doesn't know me, it doesn't know us, it doesn't know our tone. It can if you prompt it correctly. It has to learn your tone, and it has a memory, just like Claude Code, it all has a memory. Or Google, no, the other one. It's almost like a diary. Thank you, Notebook LM, yes. And so it does pick up your tone and get to know you. So I do think there is a world where we can coexist, because I still work with my coworkers. I still have to collaborate with people. But I will tell you something I think is very interesting. I think that one day, you see on resumes, I managed a team of 15 people, 20 people. I think it's going to be, I managed a team of 15 agents, agentic AI agents, 20 agents. And I have kids as well, and I think that that's where our world is going. So I'm a huge fan.
Thank you, and I agree with the point about coexistence. I lead a nonprofit in Memphis that teaches AI and computer science to kids and adults, right? And we start with that question of ethics that we're all gathered here today for, right? And that's the very first lesson in AI, right? But it's also, we when it comes to the points that you made about cognitive load and just cognition, period, we teach how important it is that there's a hierarchy between the humans and the AI. We are the thought leaders. The AI is a thought partner. And it's very helpful for some very practical cases, very helpful. I wish it were doing my taxes for me. I wish it were washing my dishes. I'm tired of that. I'm tired of taking out the garbage. And I need the robot AI to go do that for me, right? Instead of trying to take jobs, right? And this question of ethics is really important to me. being in Memphis, some of you may know that Elon Musk established this XAI supercomputer there, and all the issues there around ethics that include environmental concerns that we're dealing with in Memphis now, that really isn't not alone in Memphis, but really all around the country, that are matters of importance with respect to ethics. Also, just from an ethics perspective as well, it's like we have, as this country alone, made lots of investments through public dollars in what we're taking advantage of with AI now, right? Through the Department of Defense, through the Department of Energy, through the NSF, through CDC, all these different agencies. Yet, I think it's unethical that all the benefits of that are going to the richest, right? I'm not against people getting rich necessarily, right? If you make some risk, you ought to get some reward. But what about the return on investment for the rest of us? Right? Why isn't there a return on investment structured in? And so the concerns about surveillance and all these points that are made, I think, are very valid concerns. Privacy, security, all are very valid concerns. How do we establish the policy such that we mitigate the surveillance concerns? Surveillance has been an issue well before AI became in all our pockets now, right? Surveillance has been an issue since you got a cell phone, right? Surveillance, and so how do we establish policy for surveillance matters, privacy concerns, how do we make sure that we set up the will that we put AI in its place and let it serve us instead of us getting to where we're serving it, and let it give us a return instead of it putting us out of jobs, right? So when I think about ethics, those are the things that resonate with me, and so I'm a user too, right? I use it. I keep it in its place, though, right? It's my bitch, is what I say. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, it's my bitch, right? I'm just being real with it, so I get it, because there's no putting the toothpaste back in the tube, right? We will coexist with it. We must coexist with it, right? And so how then do we make sure that we have the agency? We're the ones leading it, and it's not wagging us, I'll stop talking.
To your point on, I agree. You can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. And I think that's where I'm sitting, and I think that's where a lot of other people are sitting who I've spoken to over the past few days, of how do we use AI and how do we collaborate with it, but also be aware of what it is actually doing to our society. And I think there's a lot of different impacts it's going to have. I used to work in sustainability, trying to get back into sustainability. And the environmental impact of AI is weighing on my brain so intensely when I have extremely smart friends who are like, I use AI all day, every day. I write my texts, I write my emails, I talk to my landlord through it, I do all these things, and I'm like, y'all, you have a brain, and AI, use AI if you need AI, but also, do we have to use it for every single thing if it is actually having this huge environmental impact? And what do we do? I would love to hear from anyone of.
Okay, that's the next question, y'all. What do we do? And we need to make space for somebody new.
I will get up.
I'll get up too.
Sorry. I'll listen to the answer.
You got it, man. You got it.
We're doing great. Everyone's doing everything right. You're doing great. Keep going. What do we do?
Oh, man.
What do we do?
I'm trying to. Oh, that's heavy. What do we do? When I think of my own use of AI, I think of it in the context of being humble about the use of it, and learning about things that I don't know the answer for, and to try to bring my full person to it, right? So what do we do when I think about the environmental cost? You got me doing impromptu like I used to do in high school. I wanted to pass this along. I'll say, for instance, most recently, I just got back from Addis Ababa during the AU Summit, or the African Union Summit, and I learned a tremendous amount about how Ethiopia is developing geothermal technology that could actually create a more efficient use, or more efficient power source for things like AI. And that's not something that's part of the conversation as much here in the United States, simply because when we think about the people who are leading our country, there seems to be a lack of hubris or a lack of humility with respect to how things should move forward with respect to AI. And I think the first thing that we do is we amplify moments like this where we have people who try to bring a collective consciousness and a more global understanding of how different countries are approaching the development of AI, the use of AI, and taking it back to a personal standpoint, it's like, how can, when I'm bringing myself to this, and I encourage everyone to ask the same question, how are you bringing your full self to this? It's like, I take back, I'm a geriatric millennial, as they call us, and and I remember going to, no, millennial.
If you're geriatric, what's a Gen X?
A young Gen X. But I remember the first step of going to the library in the Dewey Decimal System and like not really knowing where to find something. So you have to start with the questions first, right? And start with the humility of, I don't know the answer for this, as opposed to like a lot of our US policy is very America first. We're the best, we're always the best. We know what we're doing when we find out we actually don't. So I think we start by coming from a position of humility. So.
Two things that resonate, and then I'll step out. The first one is, you mentioned humility, and I think again, in this world where whether as leaders or professionals, you need to show up as you know everything. And then we look at history and we realize that the best leaders were the ones that were humble and the ones that asked. If you haven't tried it, down there it's a phone booth, yellow phone booth. It's actually a company that we have together collectively built with youth, with farmers, with a lot of people that have brought themselves fully into how might we use AI to collectively listen to the voices that have been unheard for so many years. And with that collective wisdom, can we as leaders take better decisions? And that's what we're doing. So just one other reaction, we have forgotten that we need to ask questions, but we need to have the humility to listen. Listening for understanding, that practice, hopefully that's one takeaway for all of us. I'm sure I'm taking it. It's so freaking important in the world of speed, in the world of where we need to slow down, to be present, to be humble, and to listen for understanding.
I just have one more thing and then I'm out too. This is a much more practical answer. There is a baby step that we could be taking now for sustainability and to help the environmental impact of AI. So AI models are all about data. They take in tons and tons, these massive amounts of data, terabytes of data. And the reason why it's killing our environment is it requires a lot of compute power. So it requires a lot of these server centers that are going up and sucking up all of the energy. So in the meantime, what we can do is work with companies who do a lot of compression, 25 to 50 compression ratio. So compression is when, for those who don't know, is when you make the data smaller. If you make the data smaller, you don't need as large of a server. You don't need as many servers. So it's reducing all of that power that AI is sucking in to make it useful. So companies can work with vendors who have very strong compression to reduce the data footprint off the bat, and that immediately will reduce the amount of compute power and help with sustainability.
So I think on the topic of like the ethics, it's like a lot of things. So AI kind of just like guns, not to be that guy, but AI like guns, you need regulation. Like if it gets too crazy, shit gets crazy, right? But also like with guns, there's a human and cultural part of it that I think we don't talk about a lot. We talk about what AI is doing and what the process of, or the things and the policies and et cetera, but there's a really real human cultural thing in the fact that we want answers more than we want understanding. And what AI does is it enables you to get an answer quick. So that little serotonin boost is like, oh, my homework's done, I can go out and play now, right? Like, is really what the fight is. Like versus if you do get an answer from this machine, from this whatever thing, and be like, okay, but why is this the answer? So you keep that human curiosity, which is what makes us so dope, which is what got us where we are right now, is our curiosity. But if we lose that just because of the answer, that's when things become unethical because we're moving too damn fast. So get the quick answer and then slow down and understand why that answer was so good so that your understanding gets better and maybe you don't need to ask it so damn much.
So I'm hoping to add a layer to the question of what should we do, since I don't have the answers, but one piece that you and the gentleman who mentioned the library made me think of was that I'm old enough to have kids who were children before AI, but I saw them, as soon as we had Google on the phone, get a little lazy about finding the answers to questions, and I noticed that myself. So I made a practice of, we go physically to the library, and we can look at books, and we can talk about how do we determine what's a good source, but more importantly, we go to the librarian, because there's a human expert, there's all this information here, but we also need to know how to recognize who's the human expert who can help me interpret that information and find the good source. And my youngest is 16, I'm struggling a little bit with what's the equivalent with, I know from trying to do my own research with AI that I'm getting a lot of hallucinations, I'm getting a lot of misinterpretation. Who is the expert that I go to ask, or that I teach him to go ask about, how do we judge the quality of this information? How do we judge that answer? How do we get from answer to understanding, and what do I advise him? So I'm curious we all think of that. I also just wanted to ask another layer of the what do we do. I come from corporate sustainability. Someone mentioned the environmental aspect. I'm here because I want to learn from people who know more than I do about AI, what I should be pushing my clients on in terms of corporate responsibility around AI and around tech in general. Because we're still in decades-old conversations about data security. And I know there's so much that they need to be thinking about. But I want to ask those who know more than me about it seems like a very base level or top level conversation we have about, is it gonna destroy jobs? Is it not? Is it gonna create more interesting jobs? The model that I see when we bring in new technology is that it matters what kind of jobs we're talking about. I spent a lot of my career working in the garment industry and apparel and fashion, and people assume there's a lot more technology making our clothes than there are. There are highly exploited people making 100% of our clothes. And that is because it is cheaper for companies to exploit people in other parts of the world and here, and it's easier for them to write immigration policy that supports that and write international agreements that support that than it is to invest in technology. So technology is writing the press release. It's not doing the shittiest job that someone is getting paid the least for. And I think that's a question of when we think about AI and labor, which job are we getting rid of, and is it the right one? It's not doing our dishes, it's not doing our taxes, it's not making our clothes, it's not doing the things that we are paying human beings the least for in the most vulnerable positions. And what should I be saying to my clients about that? What should I be pushing on them about that?
All right, so, gosh, my brain goes in 12 different directions. Anytime someone says something new, I'll try and keep it succinct-ish. I feel like in addition to humanity, and I'm going to get to your point, we need context, right? If we treat this issue of cognitive degradation as an AI thing, and we treat AI as a thing that happened yesterday, I think we're missing a bigger picture in that, cognitive degradation, you could attribute that to Google Maps, right? You could attribute that to social media, instant access to your friends versus making the time to get to them, right? You can attribute that to Uber and Lyft, right? Everything on demand, what you want and when you want it. The conversation I have with my little siblings going back 10, 15 years from now is that technology is making you lazier and more dependent on technology. So in a lot of ways, the AI movement we're in is just a natural evolution of what has always been developed. And I find that like when you are having these more contextual conversations with people, it helps. But I agree 100% about this humility part. I think that centering some of this conversation around humanity and what we are naturally wired to do is probably a predecessor step to figuring out AI. I'm in chats where I get the sense at times that the people that know most about the power of AI are very hyper-focused on making sure that they and their families are prepared and well-positioned before things happen, and that is deferring a broader national conversation about what we should be doing as a society. And I think that this room here can help to break that down in a way that is not fear-mongering, and hopefully is, because this conversation get very dystopian very quickly, and that's going to scare a lot of people, and they're going to shut down. They're not going to listen. So how do we figure out to get the context out in a way that like people can engage with this without being completely scared and afraid? I think is one thing that we need to be doing. And I can't remember the rest of what you asked about just now, but
How do we push companies around this question of labor? That like the jobs that pay well and are interesting are getting fewer and fewer, managing 20 AI agents instead of 20 people. The jobs that are doing the shittiest work for the shittiest pay, the most vulnerable people, those jobs are actually not being replaced because it's cheaper to exploit human beings. So how do we change that dynamic?
And one idea is that maybe we bring in more of the people that are actually doing the shitty jobs to design things. Just this week, I was telling somebody earlier, I ran into a founder who was working his second shift job, busting tables at a bar. He just ran at me across the street just to be so happy about this pilot that he got. And he's been service sector his entire life. So he's built an agentic tool that basically takes phone calls, books appointments, and sends out invoices for these one-person, two-person construction service center jobs, companies, right? So in that environment, you're not removing a job. This independent practitioner is just missing money because anytime they're inside of a toilet fixing something, they're not taking a call, and that's lost revenue. And in looking at his company and looking at the broader, like larger venture capital portfolio of things I look at least in the near term, he's positioned to win because my Ivy League peers are going to build the most thorough product ever for millions and millions of dollars, and he is going to stand up the most simple and easy to use thing for his market with half a fraction of the cost, but venture capital is less likely to fund him because of those dynamics, which we'll talk about later. But I think we can start actually looking at like who's closest to this problem that we can fund to solve those problems. One, two, you mentioned the kids. I think we need more kids in the conversation. I think they're more native to this technology than we ever will be, just because they're born into it. And I learned today they're less the solution with it. I listened to a pitch competition yesterday, and these kids said, I'm tired of ChatGPT giving me these fake answers for physics tests, and now I'm failing. So their proposal was actually like an old school like peer networking like tutor platform. Like, wait, okay, how do we listen to kids more?
So just to preface, I'm a product designer. So when I think about these questions and this topic, it's coming from a place of wanting to understand the how and the why of the way things are, how we got here, how to move forward. And not understanding, but in asking those questions, it brought me to this place of thinking about, okay, well, what is the environment that caused AI to be designed this way? And what it makes me think about is, okay, well, we're deeply ingrained inside of a capitalistic society here in the United States. And again, not to say that it's bad when people make money, but capitalism comes with a moral imperative of making money. Making money is good. That is the moral imperative. And you get lost in the decision making of, well, what makes me money? At what cost, though? And I think we're experiencing the cost, and this is the question and the conversation. So then the thought of, okay, well, how do we make it better? How do we design it better? To me, it comes down to very like deep cultural mindset. If we can sort of unwrite the narrative a bit away from capitalism and say, how do we make things that touch everybody's life, every job? How do we make things that actually matter? And that's a very hard question. That's a deep question that is not easy to talk about. Like if your kids are asking questions of like, well, how do I use it better? It's like, well, I don't know. It's tough. So yeah, I wonder, am I the only one who thinks like, shit, these are really deep philosophical and ethical questions that we need to get better at even talking about, getting more comfortable talking about these things. So. You're not the only one.
That is loud, isn't it? Hello, I'm Thomas from the UK. I used to be a corporate sustainability guy, and now I run a tech policy think tank. But I majored in ethics and philosophy a long time ago. So I think a lot about these questions. And I find the AI ethics frame helpful on one level, but less practical on the other. So I've come to think of this more as a political problem than a philosophical one, although you do have to flip between them. And if you look at what society is good at dealing with quickly, ethical problems, things can stay very bad for a long time before society rises up and actually takes action. If things are dangerous, if you think about pandemic responses, things can happen very fast. So I think framing what's happening with AI at the moment as a problem of danger, of real peril for society is helpful. And the two, or maybe three main sources of danger are, in my view, the control of the information ecosystem because of the way AI is embedded to all of our feeds, news feeds, the way we understand the world, the way we conceive of the problem of AI is being influenced by what we all experience, and the fact that we all experience that differently because of the personalization of those feeds. I think is incredibly dangerous and incredibly harmful for ability to get bipartisan support for bills, as we were hearing earlier. And the second thing is just the concentration of wealth and power in a very small number of individuals and companies. And I think AI would be much less dangerous if it was more distributed. And we were talking about the jobs point earlier. If you were going to be an electrician, but there was a monopoly on screwdrivers, so you could only be an electrician if you rented the screwdriver from Screwdriver Inc., the only maker of screwdrivers. You could build a really big business, but at any point in time, Screwdriver Inc. could just switch you off. And that's the kind of world we're going into when we say, yeah, I'm doing all this great stuff with my company, but I'm just getting Claude to do it all. Now, Claude is probably the least bad of the models, right? But there is still a principle that we are outsourcing ownership of our business models to another company. Anyway, thank you.
That's awesome. I want to reframe the conversation just a little bit. So if AI can pass the bar exam, how smart does it need to be to make our lives better? Is AI smart enough now to make our lives better? I think that probably like 2 model versions ago, it was smart enough to make our lives better. But AI can only empower our lives as well as it knows who we are, what matters to us, and what our relationships are. So how can I make my relationship with my cousin better, my relationship to my city? How can I further advance in my career or be the person that I want to be when AI doesn't know who I am? We're training bigger, faster, smarter models, and I don't think the government's going to slow that down, especially when we are at an arms race with other countries. So we have to bring the question back to us, which is not how do we get big corporations to change their approach towards AI. It's not going to happen. How do we change the way that we use AI so that our lives are better? And I think that starts with owning and controlling your identity. So I'm at the And Company, and we're here at South by Southwest to give everyone their name for the intelligence era. And what that means is that unlike the platforms of the past, like the @handle, where your data was extracted and sold for profit, you own your data and the relationships that you have with your interests, with your family, with your people, with your city. And so we think that people matter and who we are matters. And so far, the understanding of the best of who we are has been extracted by platforms. Spotify knows my best music interests. YouTube knows what podcasts I like. Travelocity knows where I like to go. But I don't have any access to that information. So I think that the answer to how does AI work for people comes to how does AI know who I am? And do we really want OpenAI to have that best understanding of who we are?
So I'm a journalist who's been covering AI since about 2016. And I wrote a book that came out about a year before ChatGPT did, and my thesis was that it's going to do to our ability to make good decisions for ourselves what Google Maps has done to our sense of direction. And you think you want to be right when you write a book, and it turns out it fucking sucks when you get it right in this case. So I've spent a lot of time talking to very well-intentioned, very smart people about the desire, as you put it, to create solutions at the individual level. And I respect what you are saying, but I disagree with you very deeply. Because I don't think it's true. First of all, we invented toothpaste tubes, you guys. We are great at putting toothpaste into tubes. Like, we do it really well. All of us would be sitting here smoking cigarettes right now if it weren't for our ability to put toothpaste back into tubes. We're good at that. I love the gentleman who was sitting here earlier saying that we need to center our humanity and also that we need to center young people. And I think that young people are the force of culture, and so any kind of human version of AI, they are going to invent. All of us olds are not going to be part of that. What we're good at is exercising democratic force as a stick. Well, not in voting, but in the courts. So right now, as of yesterday, there are now 2 big cases suing the bejesus out of the social media companies. They're the first of 2 cases that are going to lead to about 1,500 more cases. And yesterday, Meta agreed to, now we can have a good conversation, and we should, about whether this was a good move or not, but Meta has agreed, based on 1 case in New Mexico, to change their product very fundamentally and remove encryption from a certain kind of messaging. Now, that's not necessarily the solution. I don't think it's a good idea, but they're willing to make a change because they're afraid of the lawsuit. So I believe that our ability is to start thinking about the sticks. So you mentioned, what are we going to do with our clients? There's great research sponsored by the Omidyar Network that shows that women are going to be absolutely the first to lose their jobs. Non-college educated women are going to get wiped out. That is a discrimination case that a lawyer can make a ton of money off of. And so your client saying, well, I can just go with the flow here. If the effect is discriminatory, you can prove that in court. Now, it takes a while. It takes 20 to 30 years, and it feels impossible in that period of time. It took 20 years for us to get to this social media lawsuit moment. It took 30 years to get gambling into the DSM-5. It took forever to get seatbelts, and if you look back at the rhetoric of the car companies back then, they were like, that's unfeasible. We couldn't possibly put seatbelts into every car. Are you kidding? They pretend that it's impossible, but it is possible. It just involves suing the fuck out of people. And so I would just say, as adults, that is one power we have. So I would just say, when we think about what can we do, it is very intellectually satisfying to talk about centering the humanity. But as a cynical journalist, I will just tell you, I just think it is the force of the stick that is going to move things. And it can. America's very good at that. So I would just invite people to think about where the stick can come. One thing I'll just give as one example, just as a thought starter, for instance, is insurance companies right now are refusing to insure some of the big foundational model companies and the big companies that are using them on the use of that stuff because they cannot measure the risk. That's a great stick. No big company is going to go for it if the reinsurance company won't talk to them. So there's just stuff that we can do that isn't intellectually satisfying, but it's very effective. And as ugly as that is, I just want to throw the stick into this conversation. So thank you.
Yeah, I love that. I like how you guys all agree that centering young people is an important part of this conversation. I think especially following up on what you just said, young people don't really like the stick. We've been kind of chased around with that stick our entire lives. You know, we got up getting shot at in schools. Democrats didn't do anything about that. Then our data's taken from us. No one did anything about that on either side. And I think when we're thinking about learning from young people, we have to examine what young people are already saying to us, and that might not be a language that we're very familiar with. So like, I was born in 2001. I grew up alongside mobile technology. It was really hard for me to form an identity because advertisers have data on me since I was 10 years old, and that really pigeonholed me into having one specific identity. So that's a generational crisis for a lot of millennials, a lot of Gen Z, a lot of Gen Alpha, is that you talk about like what makes us human, what is our identity? We don't know. We never had that. We never got that. So it's gonna have to be even a step further back from that, which is teaching us how to be human before we can teach the AI how to be human with us. But I really like what someone said earlier, that it will be the young people who come up with that human AI. And they're already doing it. But something I want to leave you guys with is be paying attention to the culture that's happening on social media, the conversations that are happening on social media, and the memes that are happening on social media. Because we grew up in these really precarious situations as Gen Z, where we weren't feeling supported by our institutions, we're very defensive, and also it's difficult for us, and I'm being generalizing, right? I'm like ubiquitous Gen Z, but it's really difficult for us to verbalize our expectations from institutions and expect that those institutions are going to give us something because they haven't in the past. So instead, we make jokes. So when you're on Instagram and you're reading this like insane shit post about how Sam Altman is in a harem and we hate him, and like Mark Zuckerberg actually has a lizard brain, it's like, haha, that's funny. But what those posts are telling you is that the young people don't think Sam Altman and Mark Zuckerberg are fit leaders. And you need to be paying attention to that. You need to be listening to that because it's not funny. And we're going to laugh at it. But when you laugh at it, we don't like that because like, that's your fault. I don't know why you think that's funny. But so that's what I would say is when you're consuming culture, specifically online culture that was created by marginalized communities, that was created by young people, after you laugh, take a second and think about where that joke came from. And that, I think, will give you a very, very valuable insight as to what the young people are thinking about, which is going to help you create a carrot for them to get them into the conversation. Because like I said, we really do not like that stick. And I think it would be very beneficial for everyone to kind of meet that generation where they're at. And understand that humor is a big coping mechanism for us, and we're going to make a lot of jokes about the future of AI, and we're going to laugh with one another, but think about what we're laughing about, and think about how it being funny is really the only way for us to cope with this very uncertain feature that is coming towards us.
I'm just going to have a teeny facilitator moment and say this is going to be our last group. You got in. So you can stay. You can absolutely stay. And we're gonna wrap in about like 12 minutes. So let's see if we can get all the rest of the voices back in the conversation.
So many thoughts. Where do I even start? Yes, I wanted to like really echo what you said about like, you know, making jokes and stuff, because like, you know, we're in like frankly a quite like a dark time. And you know that is the way, like, you know, we move on. And I think, you know, you see, as someone who did not make the cut for Gen Z, but just like a little bit more, you know, feel that. And I also wanted to bring up what I remembered. It really, I just like clicked in my mind earlier. I think someone here mentioned that like, who do we go to, you know, to like verify stuff, like the equivalent of the librarian. And I was very glad that Jacob came up because he is a journalist, and I was thinking like that is the job, like that used to be and is still the job of a journalist, despite many like a lot of erosion to that institution. And that's something that like we need to really like keep an eye on and pay attention, because like how there's like that, you know, that like that librarian of like information and of truth and of like, you know, what actually happens, and verifying information sources. And it also comes with language. And I think like something that has been touched across from different, what we all have been talking about here is about language and how we talk about AI. AI is a moving goalpost, and we kind of know that, 30 years ago, this was AI. 20 years ago, that was AI. And then, once we get there, we move the goalposts again and again. One thing I saw, speaking of memes, I follow Dr. Avril Epps on Instagram, and one of the things she said on the thing that really blew my mind was, instead of saying AI, which is kind of misleading in its own way, name it for what it is. I'm using an image generator. I'm using a text generator. I am, is it a human facial recognition technology? Is it for targeting people in, with weapons? Those are all different uses of AI, and I think we might be doing ourselves a cognitive, not just a real material disservice by just using this term, because then we get lost. We can't figure out AI because it's so elusive conceptually. We need to remember what it really is and what it does.
I want to echo that point of I kind of internally jumped up at the librarian metaphor, but not exactly for the context it was presented in. Most people don't know that a lot of libraries also employ social workers. They are a critical third space. And the intersection of so many different community needs are able to surface in spaces like the library. There's part of me that thinks about the physical infrastructure and what it means to kind of have privatization of space and lack of access to third space, and what kind of cultivates when that happens. And then there's a part of my day job, which is spending a lot of time around social workers in an academic capacity, and thinking about what we're seeing at an inflection point where, the socio-technical, the social and technical worlds and impacts of emerging technologies are shaping younger generations in ways that haven't been accounted for. And real-time entire sectors are having to evolve to account for the fact that it's no longer just like IRL and digital in another sphere. They're merged, they're enmeshed, and with that comes a lot of stuff. And I think to the point of incentivization, that's come up a lot in conversations of when we convene around intersections of AI and social work. It really is that incentivization layer and what we think of as marking kind of the path we go towards. I would contend that you're seeing a lot of lawsuits against generative AI companies as a result of harms, as a result of suicidality. And as these cases continue to escalate, how do we respond? How do we create avenues where it's not just, you cap a cost, a dollar amount and go about your day, but you really actually sit with a deeper understanding of causality and accountability. What does that look like? And so I think these spaces are going to evolve. These intersections are going to continue to be made more real, and to the point that you brilliantly named, that Dr. Epps had also cited, when we name a thing, we think so often about the on-ramps into AI. The reality is, if you're not paying for the product, you are the product. And the other reality is that puts folks in a very vulnerable space at a time when there are so many blockages in our healthcare infrastructure writ large. So the last point I'll say to that is, I really think it's an opportunity for us who sit at different intersections to really think about, where do we design from, where do we build from, and how do we also use this moment to shift the conversation against the backdrop of a lot of capital being deployed to have us believe that there's an inevitability. Yeah.
I know, I'm looking at you like I finally got in after all this time, but I love it. I just wanted to touch on two things that each of you brought up. One is around I think we need to be remembering that there's a difference between listening to young people and giving them a seat at the table where it matters. And it's just like attending a conference or anything like that. You can listen and you can digest, and then you can never think about it again. And I hope nobody does this with all the amazing talks here. But there's also a second path where you can actually take action. And I think it's nice when we listen to young people maybe on a panel, or we listen to young people talk about their experiences or do memes, but it's more important to give them a seat at those tables where there is a direct effect. So whether that's tech companies themselves, whether that's NGOs, whether that's people moving policy, is not only listening to young people, but really taking the time to understand their issues, how they're exploring technology, because let's face it, they're one of the first groups to explore it, right? And then I think too, as like a through line to what you were saying around language, we also need to be careful of not leaving them behind. Like the way we all talk about AI is this very high level, depending on how much you have taken the time to understand it. You might have more technical terms, and that's fine. But if we're talking at a high level, and then we're expecting young people who are on these sites and on these platforms and engaging in AI to be at that same level, there's going to be a disconnect if we're not bringing them along in the conversation and making sure we're educating them. So I just wanted to leave it with those 2 points of making sure we're not just listening to young people, but embedding their voices where it matters and really giving them a seat at the table with the shared language that we're also talking about.
And giving them money.
Oh my God, y'all. This was so great. This was so great. All right. I just thank you to everyone who stepped in. Thank you for everyone who made space. Thank you for, like, y'all were just leaning in the whole time. Like, we are in this together, right? This is what this says to me. And it was such a, like, interesting, nuanced, non-binary conversation that we just had. I feel like this is my jam, guys. Like, this is my favorite thing. I'm over the moon. Thank you so much. We heard so many interesting perspectives. Please take this technology. Take this technology of the Fishbowl, and you all go to conferences. Like, help us have more democratic conversations about this. Help us spread this technology and proliferate this way of being in conversation with one another, because this is where we get such incredible, rich wisdom that we don't get otherwise.